Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Mr. Barker's class on general science. Today we are going to be doing a tiny bit of a review and then getting into some new things. So hopefully you guys are all doing well at home, doing school and being quarantined because of the coronavirus, and hopefully you did well during the earthquakes, which was interesting. But I wanted to do a tiny review of things that we've learned in class so that we can move on. I don't want you guys to get stagnant at home. Like I'm stagnant here, it's driving me crazy. So I've come up with this way that I'm filming you guys. I'm not filming you guys, I'm filming me so that I can teach you guys from home in the best way that I can. So last time we were in class, we've been learning about mammals and the different types of animals, because this is our new section that we're learning about. And we've learned about 3 different types of mammals. So this again is all just a review. We learned about the monotremes, which you can recall there's 2 different kinds, the echidnas and the platypus. These are mammals that are ancient mammals, genetically speaking, and they lay eggs, which is unusual because most mammals give birth. We learned about how they don't necessarily have mammary glands to produce milk. They usually just have an area where the milk seeps out through their skin, and then the babies lap it up. We learned about placental mammals, which is what we are, mammals that have a placenta when they're born, where the baby develops and is given nutrients and food and air, oxygen and stuff through the placenta. So like dogs and cats and bears and wolves and humans are all placental mammals. And then we learned about marsupials and how they don't necessarily have the same reproductive system as placental mammals or monotremes. They're a little bit different, like kangaroos and wombats and things like that. So hopefully that is a good review for you. I know I went over that really quickly, but you should all have that in your notes because we talked in detail about those particular types of animals. And I was very pleased to see that some of you had done your mammal reports. They were very good, learning about the different endangered animals and why they are endangered, and what we can do as humans to help protect them in their declining numbers. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over some other things that we talked about in class, some new words that are long, confusing words, okay? So we did talk about 3 different ways that animals reproduce, and how they give birth or how they lay eggs, and the different terms that we give them. So the first one that we talked about was oviparous. Whoops, that's not the right side of the marker I wanted. Now, if you remember, oviparous animals lay eggs. These are like birds and some fish and some reptiles and some amphibians, where they are either internal or externally fertilized, and then the embryo develops inside of an egg independently. It does not need its mother to develop inside this egg. That's why chickens, okay, can lay an egg and then you can incubate it. It doesn't necessarily need to be inside of the animal to develop. It can be outside. So oviparous are animals that don't give birth, but they lay eggs, and the embryo develops inside of the egg. We also learned about a big word that is ovoviviparous. O-U-S. Ovoviviparous. Now these are kind of unique animals, and people don't necessarily think of ovoviviparous animals as in their own category. But these are animals that will lay eggs, and then soon after the egg is laid, it will hatch. So there's some lizards down in southern Utah that will lay eggs, and then like a couple days later the baby will hatch out of the egg, and that's because while the egg was inside the mother, it had time to develop. So they have like this incubation period inside of the mother. This is also interesting because a lot of sharks do this, where they will have eggs inside of them, inside the mother, and then the mother carries the eggs around. The eggs hatch inside of her, and then she gives birth to the babies. So they technically don't come from like a placenta or anything like that. They won't necessarily have what we have, like a belly button or anything like that. But they hatch inside the mother, and then the mother will give birth to them, which is super unique. There's a lot of sharks that do that, and we'll learn about those sharks when we talk about fish, okay? And then the other one that we did talk about, again, this is all reviews. You guys should have these in your notes. I'm going over them really quickly just as a little catch-up for you guys. The last one that I would like to talk about is viviparous. Now, these are animals that give birth, okay? So it's interesting. Mammals are viviparous. They give birth. They do not lay eggs of any kind. There's no eggs inside the mother that develop, and then they hatch inside of her. That's not what happens here. These are all animals that give birth to live young. And ironically enough, like I said up here with ovoviviparous, there are some sharks that are ovoviviparous. There are some sharks that are oviparous, and there are sharks that are viviparous. So it just kind of depends on the specific species of animal that you're talking about. But all mammals are pretty much viviparous, except for those monotremes. Okay, those monotremes that we talked about would be ovoviviparous because they lay eggs. Remember the echidna and the platypus. Okay, so quick review. Hopefully we're getting good on that. So today I wanted to start something new so that we weren't getting stagnant at home. Okay, and I wore my special chicken shirt here so that we could all know that today's topic is going to be about birds. One of my favorite topics to talk about. Now, something unique about birds, so we'll write birds up here. Birds are some of my favorite animals because they're like this weird link between mammals and reptiles, and they're just a mashup of everything. They're like, I can't explain it. I just love how they're so unique and so different from all the other animals in our animal kingdom. And the reason why I say that is because there are some certain aspects with birds that only birds have. So birds will lay eggs. Okay, they lay eggs. They're not like reptile eggs or amphibian eggs. They are a hard-shelled egg. It's when you get up in the morning and you make scrambled eggs for your family or whatever, you're cracking into a hard outer shell, and that's very unique for birds. They lay these eggs. That's how they reproduce. So they lay hard eggs. They also are warm-blooded. Now this is kind of unique because the only other animals really that we know of that are warm-blooded for this class that we're going to talk about are mammals. So mammals like me and you and your dog or cat at home, we create the energy that we need. We get it from the food that we eat, and we can create our own heat inside of our bodies. Unlike reptiles that need it from an external source, like a snake, in the springtime you'll see them often laying on a rock or soaking up some sun, and that's because their body temperature has to get to a certain degree before their metabolism and body starts producing so they can live, okay? But mammals don't do that. Mammals create their own climate in their body from the food that they eat, and that's very, very cool. And birds do the same thing, but they also lay eggs. So it's a little interesting that they do both what reptiles and stuff and other animals like that do, but they are also warm-blooded like us. Okay? Something cool with these guys is they have feathers. No other animal has feathers, and feathers are pretty cool because they keep a bird warm, they help them fly, they keep them dry during wet weather. They do all sorts of things, but it's not hair. It's not what we have on top of our head or what is on the back of your dog or anything like that. It's completely different. So that's very indicative to birds. We also have one more thing that I'd like to talk about is that they have scales. Now you might be like, I have never seen a bird with scales. Are you kidding me? That's weird. It is kind of weird, but if you look at a chicken foot or a bird foot close enough, you will see that they have scales on their feet, okay? So they're like this mashup of all these other animals put together into one category, which is why I really, really like birds. Especially because they're like miniature dinosaurs. Okay, so now that we have our list here of things that are special for birds, we're going to talk about the eggs of a bird. and the different parts of them. Okay, so I'm going to try and draw an egg here. Whoops, that's not going to be a good egg. Okay, so we have an egg here. Now, what we're doing is we're taking an egg and we're cutting it in half. So we're looking at what's inside of the egg. Okay, obviously the outside is round and different colors, and we'll talk about those later in other videos of where that color comes from. But right now I wanted to talk about what's inside of the egg. And I apologize, I only have a black marker. Usually in school I would do this all in different colors so that you could distinguish the different parts. But the only other color I have is red, and you can't see it on the board, okay? So bear with me when I just use the black marker here. One of the most important parts of the egg is what makes it yellow, okay? And that inside, there's a orange or yellow part of an egg, and this is called the yolk, okay? So in your notes, I would write and draw this diagram, and then to the side here, when I've written the word, I'm going to tell you kind of what these things do for that particular, why a chicken egg or a bird egg has these particular components. So for the yolk, it's funny because most people think that the yolk is the bird. It's the baby bird. It's not. It's actually the food. Okay? So while a baby bird is developing, it will eat the yolk inside the egg. So when you hatch a chicken or a bird, there's no more yolk in it. And that's just because they've absorbed it all. They've eaten all their food source. So it's kind of cool. These little eggs that these birds lay are time capsules for that particular developing fetus. Everything's in there that they need as long as they have the correct temperature and humidity. Okay? Now the outside here, you all know, is a shell. Okay, the shell is for protection. Okay, protection from outside sources. Okay? It also, so it's protection, but it also helps with getting oxygen and water to the baby, because these babies need to breathe. They need to have some kind of oxygen given to them during their time of development. They also need water. So what I mean by water is humidity. It's not like you're going to dunk the egg in water. It's how much humidity is in the air. Because interestingly enough, if you were to take a shell, okay, and look at it really closely, or even under a microscope, just a piece of it. So this square over here is going to represent a part of a shell. You would see that there's little tiny holes all over the shell. And if you wanted to do a little experiment at home, you can take a chicken egg that you get at the store and you can put it in water, put it in a cup of water, and just watch what happens. Because what happens is you'll see little bubbles, little tiny, tiny air bubbles going to the surface of the cup. And that's because these holes allow oxygen exchange through the shell. It's so important that the eggs have these little holes to allow oxygen and air and carbon dioxide to leave and enter. Okay, so it's kind of cool. You can physically see that on an egg. Even though an egg's really, really smooth, they do have holes. There's another part of the egg. So there's always a top of an egg, and there's always a bottom. Okay? There's a top and a bottom of an egg. The bottom of the egg has this special layer right here. It is a air sac. Now you can also see this when you crack an egg in the morning for breakfast. It's the blunt or the fat part of the bottom of the egg. Look at it, and there's like this little air pocket in there. There's like a film and like a little pillow. And that's exactly what this thing does. So as the baby develops, they actually develop head down here, not up here. So as it's being moved around, or the mom is shifting and jumping in and out of the nest, the egg will move and the baby inside will move. This little air sac helps as like a pillow so that the head of the baby bird doesn't get hurt with the shell, because the shell is hard. So they have this pillow. It's a protective pillow, and it protects the baby during development. It protects the neck and the baby of it, or that protects the head of the baby, okay? Now, if you look closely at an egg, you would see that there's these little weird white It's kind of gross. I won't lie. It kind of looks like snot. Okay, there's like these little snot parts inside of an egg that are white. And then as you cook them, they go away. But if you crack an egg and put it in a bowl, you'll see these white things. Now, these things are called the Schalza. Okay? Now, the Schalza are pretty interesting because what they do is they keep the yolk suspended. So they keep the yolk suspended. They're like little bungee cords to make sure that nothing's getting shifted around and shaken from side to side. It keeps everything in a central location. So they can stretch, they can unstretch, but they try and keep that yolk in the center because many of you might know if you take an egg and you shake it really hard and then crack it open, the yolk is broke. Okay? But this kind of helps protect that. Now, again, I apologize, I only have black marker. I'm going to draw this weird line around the yolk. Now, if you crack an egg open, you will see that around the yolk, you'll have some really thick see-through material around the yolk, okay? This stuff is called the thick, okay, albumin, okay? Thick albumin. The thick albumin also helps protect the baby. It's the white parts full of protein inside the egg when you eat an egg. And that's that white part. That's where your proteins are coming from. Okay, and then on the outside, throughout the rest of the egg, you'll have something called the thin albumin. Okay, so you have the thick and the thin albumin. And that's just the see-through stuff in the egg. And then when you cook it, it turns white. There's one more part that I would like to talk about, and that's where the baby develops. So when you crack an egg in the morning for breakfast and you look at it, look really closely at the yolk because usually you'll see a tiny dot somewhere. It's white usually. It's very small. It's usually a really small white dot. And this is what the baby would be. Okay, this is the development of the baby. So if you have just a dot, the egg was not fertilized and there would be no baby chicken, okay? However, if it is a fertilized egg, this dot will have this weird little outlining layer around it. So you'll have the white dot, you'll see some of the yolk, and then you'll see this ring, and it looks like a bullseye. And this is called the germinal disc. Okay. Now, as that baby develops, that germinal disc will elongate, and you get like the nodal cord and the nerve cord starting to develop. You'll see a dark spot at the top of it, which would be the eyes of the bird, and then it starts to develop into the baby bird. So on an egg, if you see any bullseye, they're also known as bullseye disc or bull discs. That egg would have been a chicken if it was incubated, okay? But if there's not one there, there's no incubation going on, okay? So these eggs are pretty cool. There's a lot that goes into the anatomy of an egg, but it's pretty remarkable to think that evolution has made it possible for these animals, for these birds, to develop a way to have babies and procreate outside of their body. So all the mother has to do is find a way to incubate them, and most birds will sit on their eggs and they incubate them, and most of the temperature for incubation is 99.5 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? And that's really, really critical. If the egg and the baby get below that, even just 1 degree for a couple hours, it can kill a baby. But there are birds that have been recently discovered that they don't actually sit on their eggs. So there's an island, I can't remember where, and I'll find it for you, but there's an island where these birds will dig holes in the sand, and they lay their eggs in the sand and then bury them. And that's because this island is very active with volcanoes, so the soil underneath, or the sand and soil underneath the island, is warm at this temperature. So these baby birds actually hatch under the sand, kind of like a sea turtle or something, and that's how they incubate them, okay? Pretty remarkable. This is the lesson we have for you today, so I would encourage you guys to please put this stuff in your notes. There will be a quiz on it later. And you guys are home, so be prepared for a quiz, and you can use your notes on the quiz too, which is a lot better than what it would be in school, because I wouldn't let you use your notes on this. So write these down, watch this video a couple times if you need to. I know it's not the most exciting thing in the world, but as long as you have this information, you'll be able to ace that quiz. If you have any questions, please email me. And you all have my email address. So I hope you're doing well, and make sure you learn about eggs, and we'll give you more lessons on birds later.